Webinar from ProcurementExpress.com. My name is James Kennedy. I'm the partner manager and CEO here, and I'm coming to you from our offices in beautiful South Africa. I'm very honored to be joined by one of our long-term customers, Stefan Illich. And you know, the purpose of this webinar is really to show you how our tool can be used in the construction industry. So we do have customers in different areas, you know, farming, agriculture, facilities management, construction, events and marketing and so on. But Stefan's particular genius is what he has taken with Procurement Express, and he's actually applied it to his industry specifically with great results. So much so that I've asked him to come on here and to explain how he's managed to achieve those results using the tool. So he's going to give us a rundown of how exactly you should use it when you're managing your construction project. He's going to give us a demo exactly to show you how to set it up, how the software to set it up. And at the end, there's going to be an opportunity to actually have a consultation with Stefan, find out more if you're interested in taking it further. So Stefan, thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, as always. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon if you're not in Pacific Standard Time. I hope everybody is able to join us and get settled in. Thank you, James. I think you highlighted everything we want to go over here. I just want to, I guess, preface that by saying thank you to James and his team, because he made it sound like I did a lot of the work on my own, but really their team over at Procurement Express was always available 24/7, answering all my stupid, quirky questions and making all the modifications that I constantly asked for. So thank you to you guys for that. It's been a pleasure working together. So
absolutely.
With that, I'll take it away. So like James said, I want to give you guys a rundown on how I use Procurement Express, how I apply it in the construction industry. Before I jump deep into Procurement Express, I just want to give you a high-level overview of what we're going to go over. There's a couple of pieces of background information that I think are important that we get on the same page and define a couple terms before I start using them interchangeably. So there's a couple different types of procurement that I'll go over, and they are purchase orders and contracts are the two major divisions that we'll focus on. We use purchase orders for our smaller purchases, contracts for defined scopes and things like that. I want to go over the different types of the ways we get them. Volume, relationship price, project pricing. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll jump into purchase tracking, and that will be the platform we use to lead off talking about Procurement Express, and the two types being electronic versus manual or paper-based. That's when we'll jump into the platform. And I see that I've left my slides here with the old name rubber stamp, but as most of you know now, it's been launched as ProcurementExpress.com, and I think that everybody's happy with the new name and the new logo. I'm just a little bit behind on the times. We'll talk about implementing the software. We'll talk about the setup, how to do it. I'll talk about some of the benefits and challenges of the program, and a couple of things that we found along the way that we weren't really expecting. So without talking about that any further, I want to jump right into procurement types. So as I mentioned really quickly, there's two things: purchase orders and contracts. Purchase orders are the type of tracking we use when we want to make a small quantity or small value purchase, perhaps a non-repeating purchase, something that we can't predefine sometimes, and we need to actually procure or complete the service before we know the full scope or cost of it. We use contracts when we know the scope or the total amount or the total duration. And so we don't need to leave anything open. We can predefine the terms, we can sit down, agree, put them on paper. Just a quick touch, there is open purchase orders, which is essentially when you give a reference number or name to a purchase and you leave it open. However, it's not really purchase tracking if you don't attach any terms or values to it. And so we won't really touch on that here. Going on into pricing, there's two major types of pricing that we get from our suppliers and from our contractors. Our supplier price lists are the products that we buy, our lumber or concrete, our rebar if we're getting it separately. And contractor pricing is generally made up of unit rate or hourly rate sheets for equipment and machine. The two are distinct because the supplier price lists are often more static and easily captured. And as you'll see a little bit later on, they're very easily uploaded into Procurement Express as a platform for easy reference and autofilling of your purchase orders. The next thing that really impacts our pricing is our relationships with our vendors. Everybody in construction knows that if you set up a new account with a new supplier, you're not going to be the #1 guy on his list right at the beginning. And so many of us work on finding the right vendor with the right services and the right products for us, and then building on that relationship so we can ensure we drive the prices down and the service level up over time. A little something that we've been borrowing from our friends down in the United States is called a master service agreement. And we're starting to implement more and more of these up here in Canada. I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia. And these are essentially contracts with suppliers where we agree to purchase only from this supplier for either a fixed period of time or a fixed number of projects. So what is purchase tracking? Now that we know what we're looking at, what we're dealing with, what makes up a purchase, what is purchase tracking and why do we do it? Well, there's two major reasons. One, we want to verify that the order happened and that it was accurate. And two, we want to verify that the pricing is what we agreed to or something that we're okay with. So there's many different ways to do that, and people employ different strategies from formal to informal methods. And once you get into a mid to a larger size company, you realize that you quickly need to set out formal processes so that everyone making purchases or orders is doing it the same way. There's two main ways to track it. One is electronically by recording things on spreadsheets or in software like Procurement Express. And the other one is on paper. And that can be anything from a notebook to a triplicate book to purchase order, carbon copy paper, etc. Now, I don't think I have to really go into the differences between paper and electronic too much, but electronic, it's available in the cloud. It updates automatically for everyone. It creates a database that everybody can reference and search from and add to. It can be formatted and pasted in many different ways. Versus paper-based, where essentially the only copy is with the user who originates it. And that piece of paper needs to physically make its way to some central location, generally, like a head office for processing. So I'm sure you can imagine that that can be a tricky part of the process. So going into a little bit of why my company went from paper-based to electronic and what happened. Now, the first thing that we did was we took a look at our current workflow. What was happening and why were we having so many problems with invoices coming back without purchase orders or purchase orders not having all the right information on them? And this was really affecting our accounting pay cycle, which was again affecting our supplier relationships. And it was essentially creating more work for everybody in the office, especially the coordinators, the accounting team, and even our superintendents on site, because they had to constantly answer questions about their purchases. So this is a bit of a high-level example of what happens in this particular situation. So an end user places an order, phones up, orders some concrete, provides a PO number, or doesn't. Then at that point, with the paper-based system, needs to write down the specifics of that order. How much concrete did he order? How much did it cost? When is it going to be delivered? Where is it going to be poured? Et cetera, et cetera. The supplier, the vendor, in this case, let's say the concrete supplier, sends out the concrete, generates an invoice, sends it into the office. At the same time, in parallel, the superintendent should send that purchase order to head office. And those two documents should, in theory, meet at the same time on the coordinator's desk and be stamped for processing. Now, this is where the biggest hurdle to this system is overlooked, and that is matching those two pieces of paper together. It's all well and good. even if you have that 5 or 6 or 7 digit code on the paper-based purchasing slip and marked on that invoice, you still have stacks and stacks of paper to go through to match up. It's an arduous process, and it takes way more time than people think. This is the single greatest benefit to the electronic system, where you only need to type in the number, or not even type in the number, because as part of the system, and I'll talk about later, we've asked the suppliers to send in the purchase orders, because one of the greatest parts of electronic purchase tracking is that information can be shared. It's not just with the superintendent, it's sent directly to the vendor, and the vendor can attach it to their invoice, taking that entire process, the entire leg of the process, out of the superintendent and the coordinator and your construction company's hands, saving time, which saves money. And I don't think I need to say anything more about that. Going down the process, let's say everything works together, it matches up, the invoice gets reviewed, approved, and submitted for payment. That's the way it should work. So those are the two major breaks in that step: are the paper getting to the office and getting matched up, but also getting all the correct information on that piece of paper. A piece of paper doesn't restrict you from filling in only half the information. It doesn't remind you that you've left a field blank. So we've had lots of situations where we get a purchase order in and the number matches the invoice, but the information on it is insufficient. So
Stefan, if I could just mention here, I mean, this looks great. When you lay it out like this, you see, oh, this all looks so logical. But when it's actually implemented and that data isn't there, it's the human side that really kicks in, right? So when the missing piece of information isn't there, that causes an angry phone call, that causes delay, that causes stress for people trying to operate in the system, right? So this looks ideal, but if you don't have something in place, it can actually turn into a bit of chaos, because that's what you're trying to get to. But it's all the kinks along the way, which can really actually just make life harder for everyone.
Absolutely. And I don't think I can paint that picture well enough to anybody without making you walk through this process yourself and try to get somebody to submit information to you on a piece of paper, get the information to you, and then you match it up to another piece of paper. And you'll see how long it can take with just one. And when you think about, on an average month, we are receiving about 200 to 250 invoices. And so our coordinator would literally spend her entire working time trying to match these pieces of paper together and call all these superintendents to get all these things back and to try to get people paid on time, which ended up with, like you say, lots of angry phone calls. And where's my money? Where's my check? Why isn't my invoice paid? So yeah, exactly. We realized we had a major problem there. We realized we were wasting time, we were wasting money, we were burning relationships because we weren't able to efficiently process invoices. And so we decided to do something about it. And one of the things that I researched was, I thought that our problem was with purchase tracking. And turns out I was a little bit right, to toot my own horn a little bit. So we jumped into how are we going to solve the problem? And so the first thing we did was figure out what our requirements are and where the problems are. And I did a very similar exercise with the previous workflow that I showed you guys with our entire team. And we talked over, what are our major problems and how can we solve them? And a couple of things we identified were, we want to have a database of the information that everyone can access. We don't want to keep sending pieces of paper back and forth. We want to move everything to electronic so that we can share at the same time and access the same information. And so we realized that we needed an electronic system that would track all of this information for us. The next thing we did, and this is probably the single most important part of implementing any system, and I can't stress this enough, find out everyone and anyone who is going to use or be affected by this software and by this program and by this process. And that means everybody in your company, the accounting department, the construction department, the development department, the administrative manager, and all of your vendors. It's very, very important that you get everybody on board early. It's the single easiest way to tank a project is to forget about somebody important, to carry the project on ahead and realize that you never got their input or you didn't get them to support the project in the first place. And that's just nothing to do with Procurement Express, but just simple project planning project management tools that we need to keep in mind whenever we're making any major changes. One of the risks and constraints that we identified, I'll touch a little bit on it later, was IT and making the switch from paper to electronic, and people's concerns with security and with bugs or viruses and things like that. So we'll touch a little bit about that just a little bit later on here in the program. The next step we did, once we had all our requirements together, we had our whole team on board, everybody was excited about making this change and getting this better. We wanted to know, should we find and purchase a program or should we build our own? At that time, we didn't know much about it. After a quick search, I was able to find several different programs, which I evaluated and eventually selected Procurement Express because they ticked all the boxes that we needed. Once we were ready with the program, I signed up for a trial, which I'll show you guys how to do right at the end. And I set up an implementation plan. I wrote a quick schedule on how long it would take us to implement, and then I set up training programs for everybody who's going to use it. Just have to remember to keep everybody engaged along the process. You can't run away with it by yourself. You got to make sure that people using it are at the front lines of learning right with you. So, going into some of the things that we were after, some of the things that we got out of this program that we wanted to. Number one, for me, my favorite part of it was budget tracking. Now, the traditional budget tracking is done from job cost reports from the accounting department. And these are typically about 60 days behind. From the time you receive your invoice, they're entered, 30 days later, they're paid, and another 30 days later, the accounts are reconciled and they're ready to spit out a report for me. Now, for me, managing a project, 60 days is far too late to tell me that I'm going over on a cost code, or I'm not looking good in a certain category, or I have a bunch of money in a certain category and not in another. I need to know now. And that's what the Procurement Express tracking system gave me, is a one-click budget report that gives me live to the minute of all the purchase orders that have been written so far. So even before they're invoiced, I know that cost has been committed or incurred. So that was huge for me. Absolutely game-changing in terms of what I could do with reporting and cost control. The second was keeping a supplier database. Now, I use the standard report that spits out all of the suppliers that have been entered in, and I put it into my own format, which keeps notes on suppliers, ratings, service levels, and things like that. So we are able to easily update a database that keeps track of very important information that we use to rank suppliers and reference when we renegotiate contracts and service agreements. The other thing as a subset of that, but a separate database, was a pricing and product database. And what this kept inside of it was all the products we buy, including hourly unit rates for labor and how much we pay for them. So we were quickly able to identify that we were actually buying the same products from different suppliers at different prices for different projects. But once we were able to lay these things out in an easy to see Excel spreadsheet, we're able to sort, put these things next to each other and make a plan on how we can best amalgamate all of these and make our smartest choices when selecting vendors so that we pay the best prices across all projects and that we make available the same services to all projects instead of running as independent silos. The fact that the system is searchable, I don't know how many times I had to look back and pull out an old purchase order and see what I'd written on it and find my notes and see if I attached a quote or a photo, which you can do. And that was very, very, very helpful. And I just jumped into the next point, which is the interactivity about it. Each purchase order has a place where you could leave notes, comments, and attachments. So I commonly used it to attach quotes if I had them, emails regarding the service, how it went, what happened, who ordered it, when they ordered it. And this is available to all the users on that project. Everybody's able to interact, leave comments for each other, and everybody's able to see it depending on the sharing settings that you want with your particular team and who is on that particular project. So that's all the good stuff. We did have a few challenges, as with any project. The number one was convincing people that it was safe. We had a lot of people in the company who were thinking, well, it's not safe to have our information up on the web. It took a little bit of convincing, but just a little bit of data and help from the guys at Procurement Express to explain security systems and protocols, and we were able to convince everybody that this was just as safe as having it on our servers because the information was already online, and the team over there did a good job of showing us how our information is protected. Getting everybody on board. At first, I thought this was going to be the easiest thing to do. I thought everybody's going to love it because it's going to save time. People are resistant to change. And so there were a couple of holdouts, and I just took the time to do one-on-one demonstrations with them to show them how it's going to impact their work and their workflow. And eventually that overcame all of these humps, and everybody turned around and became a supporter. Setting up training programs. Now, training on this program was extremely easy. Getting people together to train and figuring out whether I should do one-on-one or group training or online training, that was a bit of a challenge, and it took a little bit of playing around for me. I realized that the best delivery method was small groups. So I would go out and visit the superintendent and the CSO and the assistant on site, and I'd show 2 to 3 guys at the same time a little 15-minute demo on how to open a purchase order, how to send it for approval, how to attach comments. And I found that to be the best delivery method rather than heavy operating manuals or process manuals. They were just not necessary. The system is intuitive enough that you can demonstrate it quite quickly. A couple of things we didn't expect to get out of the program, but we did along the way, as James kind of mentioned a little bit at the beginning here, is we came up with certain capabilities for the construction industry specifically, which we didn't expect to get out of it. And one of those, my favorite, is quantity tracking. Now, when I spoke with James early on and I saw one of the first reports that showed all the information for their purchase order, I noticed that the one thing I couldn't see separated out was the quantity column. And I said, James, can I attach the quantity I've ordered to every single product I've ordered? And he said, well, of course, no problem. I can generate that report for you easily. I said, well, that's a very powerful report for us. And we set that up very quickly. And now I constantly use that to track against original estimates. So not only do I use the cost control metric on the budget side, I also can break the project down into how many cubic meters of concrete we've ordered to date, how many floors we've ordered, how many 2x4s, et cetera, all the way down to very, very smallest pieces of the project, which at the end gives us a huge metric for predicting future project costs. So this was an amazing benefit for us, and we're using it daily now to track estimates. The other one was product information. We didn't realize just how much information we'd get about what products we buy and how much we pay for them and who we buy them from and how often we buy them. And this is, like I mentioned earlier, really helped us go back to our vendors and set up the smartest purchasing relationships so that we don't spend time negotiating prices on things that we don't really need so much. And we were able to attribute values to products per project values to certain products. So we know exactly what the delta would be if we negotiate $1 a meter savings on this particular mix. So that was very important too, because it gives us a strong negotiating position where we can financially support our decisions going forward. And I just can't say, like, there's no limit to how much data you can get out of this. You can spin it many different ways. I've created 3 or 4 different reports that I use the raw data out of Procurement Express to populate automatically. And it's just, there's no limit to what you want to do. It's what data you want to present is going to be reflective of what you can and want to do with the program. So without any more on that, I'd like to take a quick minute. We got a couple of minutes left here. I'd like to show you guys how quickly you can set up a program. Before I do, I'll leave this up on the screen for a few minutes. If anybody has any more specific questions and just can't wait for the next webinar, please drop me a line. Here's my email address. Send me a quick note. I'll set up a time to review it one-on-one with you if you'd like. If you'd like some help setting up a trial, I'd be happy to do that, or anything else to do with the program. Please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else at the Procurement Express team. You can look up the program directly at www.procurementexpress.com. and you'll see that it's very easy to sign up for a trial there. And I'll show you what you're going to see when you do that.
While you're switching over there, I'll just emphasize, I think it's a great opportunity for someone who is, managing a project like you were, to get on the phone and really quickly figure out the benefits that you could deliver or could be delivered here. I don't think there's no obligation to doing that, and it's totally just for informational purposes. But it's great because you get someone who's really in your industry, knows exactly what you're talking about, knows how they were able to already save thousands of hours of effort for people. So it's a great service you're offering there, Stefan.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to do it. I love working on new technologies in our industry, and I still feel like this is relatively new, and a lot of people are not using any sophisticated systems yet, and I hope they will soon. I hope we don't spend any more time in the dark ages. So what you guys are seeing here, and James, you see my screen okay? Am I coming through here?
5x5.
This is your base home screen. This is a brand new company. So if you click to start a free trial, this is exactly what you'll see. This is all I've done is created a new trial for a company called Webinar 2.0 Ltd. So I just want to jump through and show you how I set it up for a construction company. There's a few quick steps. It'll take about 3 or 4 minutes. So I haven't preloaded anything, but because I'd like to show you guys how I do it. So the first thing I do is I change a couple of the aliases here, and they make it really easy. There's 2 categories here called departments and budgets. And in construction, we generally refer to these as projects and cost codes. And so I just fill in the aliases that I want to see and click save, and it's going to update my tabs right here. Projects, cost codes. So the first thing we'll do is we'll set up a project. Now, last time around, James, we built Procurement Express's new headquarters. This time, I think we're going to build James's villa.
I like it. Well,
and we're gonna build him a nice villa. Where would you like it to be, James?
On the edge of a cliff in the west of Ireland, please. That would be great.
Okay, this sounds like it's going to be a challenging construction project.
I'm a very difficult customer.
Yes, you are. Okay, so we've preloaded this project, and now you see when I go under new purchase order, I can see James's villa right here. So the first thing we want to do with a new project is we want to upload the budgets into it. So I go over to the cost codes tab, and this is going to list all the cost codes across all budgets. There's a filter button here so that when you get more, you can split them out by project, by cost type, or by specific cost code across all projects, which is really helpful if you use the same cost codes in each of your budgets, as many of us do. So what you're going to do is you're going to click import cost codes right here, and it's going to give you an option for a sample import template. And you just click on that right there. It's going to download a CSV file. Open up the CSV. It's just going to have a couple of headers here to show you where to put the information. Now, if you already have a pre-made budget, it's a simple copy paste here. I haven't pre-made a budget because it's fairly simple to set up. So we'll just fill in a couple of these items and be on our way. So I'll fill in a couple of cost codes here. Concrete, wood framing, let's say excavation, and windows. That's all you get, James. And then I'll label these with codes, examples. You can use as few or as many digits as you like. You do not need to fill in the ID portion or the cost type. This is optional. The amount of the budget is pretty important. You can leave it blank, but I wouldn't. We're going to build James a pretty small villa here. We're not going to spend a lot of money because he needs to stay at work to keep making Procurement Express better. I want him to spend all the time at the villa. A couple of notes here to touch on. Start date and end date, not something we use in construction very often. These are used when you have an annual budget and you want to set up, for example, the next year or 2 or 3 years, and use the same cost codes and have them begin and end on certain dates. This will automatically bring you into your next fiscal year, I think they call it. We don't really use that because we're on a project basis, so I generally just leave these blank. The approvers column is when you've got everybody set up in your company, you fill in the email addresses here of the approval hierarchy. It will automatically route purchase orders through the lowest available approver. But we're going to go into that in a separate webinar in the future. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that one, because the approval hierarchy is an awesome workflow. Huge benefit to the program. The department here is the project. So we're just going to put the name of the project, James's Villa, and drag that down. So that's all. That's about all it took. You can put more information if you need to, but this is basically your minimum requirement. So I'll just save that to my desktop, pop right back over to this window, and click choose file. Just put it on the desktop here. And the budget import template, open and upload. Give it a second. And here we go. This is a preview of what it's going to look like when it uploads. I check to make sure everything looks all right. Perfect. And I click import here. And now I have all my codes inside. So that's all I need to do to be ready to begin using the program. So there are many different steps that we can take, including uploading our supplier database, our price list databases. We can customize the purchase order form. We can customize the fields that we use on the purchase order. I mean, there really there's no end to the customization you can do here on a pretty easy basis. So when you don't have your supplier database loaded, you have the option to add a new supplier. Form pops up right here. And then you're good to go. You can fill in as much or as little of the information as you need. The description column here, there's a couple different options. There's also an SKU field that you can enable on here, which I like to use, especially for things with codes such as concrete or lumber or things that I'm getting en masse from suppliers. When you type in your description, the first time it won't have anything, but as you enter it, it will now save construction management and the unit price I enter in there as an item automatically, and it will begin building my product database so that next time when I start a purchase order, when I start typing construction management, it'll populate it, pre-fill the unit price for me, and predict where I want to put it. So I'll put that under concrete, for example, and right down here will pop up how much remaining budget I have right away. So before I even code the thing to the wrong cost code or to a cost code that's full, I'll already get a quick preview of it before I click send or approve or anything. Tax rate can be none, tax exempt, or any other custom field. And we have those through the company settings. They can be set up rather quickly. The add an item field gives you an option to add another line item. And if you didn't want it, to delete it back out. And it's as simple as that. We're ready to send it off, or we can add notes. We can manually select an approver. We can add a quote or a photo or an email or anything of the like. So that's all I'm going to take you guys through this time. This is a fully delivered purchase order, sent, approved, logged. And if you return to your home screen now, you can see that it's available for you right there. And like I was saying before, searchability is easy. I can search by supplier, I can search by cost code, I can search by project, or by any of the keywords that are going to be found in here. So.
Great. I mean, it always blows me away when I see other people demonstrating our product and using it. You know it inside out. It makes me feel so good inside because it's like, wow, it feels like, yeah, we're doing something good here. We're seeing you demonstrating the value. I just love it. I could watch it all day long. So listen, Stefan, I really appreciate you taking the time, and again, that offer to work directly with anyone who's more interested in this. There's a lot more you can do. I know we just touched on some of the benefits here. So again, your email is stefan.illich@procurementexpress.com, and my email is james.kennedy@procurementexpress.com if anyone wants to get in touch with me. That's it. Have we got everything? Are we gonna wrap this up?
That's it. I mean, we could go all day, but we should wrap this up and save something for next time.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, listen, thanks very much for everyone for attending, and I'll see you soon, Stefan. See you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, James.